If you're retiring with maybe not as much saved in a 401k, but possibly you have another income coming in, such as a pension, it may be all right. Karen NZ1099 asked us about this, and, we don't know her specific scenario, but let's just take a look real quick at NestEgg. Let's see what's going on and what maybe we could just put together to give you an idea, walking through having a 401k and also a pension, some things to think about and really look through with that as well. So if we're looking here, we've got retired Roger and Mrs. Retired Roger, both 59 years old. They're going to be retiring at 60. Currently, their living expenses, $4,000 a month. They're saving 5% to the 401k right this second. So just getting a little bit of money into the 401k, but not a significant amount. So we've got, Mrs. salary, Mrs. Retired Roger there, $65,000. Mr. Retired Roger's at $65,000. So kind of the same thing. Now, if you watched a video I did recently, I talked about Yahoo Finance said at age 65, the average retirement, Social Security retirement would be $1,545. So I put $1,545 for 2024 for each of them. So as that just the average of taking their Social Security. But then we've got Retired Roger's got a pension, $40,000. So let's take this for a minute. Let's spend a little bit of time on this. So if we're looking at the $40,000 pension, what we really want to think through though is there a cost of living increase? That is going to be a big factor, because if you retire at age 60 and you get $40,000, well, if you have zero inflation increase and you go into, let's say, 80 years old, that's 20 years without any inflation increase. $40,000 is not going to buy you much. I'm sure you've probably seen that now and felt your pockets, because we've had a higher inflation here recently that is going to give you the example of what this could look like. Then from there, we want to talk through the survivor benefit. Survivor benefit is a big issue, because let's just say that Retired Roger here gets $40,000 a year, but there's no survivor benefit. Well, if he gets $40,000 a year and then something happens to him early, unexpectedly, well, guess what? That could be a real problem for Mrs. Retired Roger, because then she wouldn't have any extra income and she'd only have the 401k or any savings they have. We're working through that with a client right this second, because what's going to happen is when the husband passes away, the client would only receive 1/3 of the pension. And that 1/3 is not going to be enough to carry her unless we make sure that we're doing the proper planning for her, which, we're working on. So when it comes to this, though, we want to talk about taxes as well with a pension. Is it state exempt, tax exempt there? For Retired Roger, we have them living in the state of Florida just because we're avoiding all the state tax income issue. So we're just putting them in Florida right this minute. And so we're looking at this breakdown. Then we say, okay, well, what are their goals? All right, well, they're going to retire at 60. So that's coming up here soon. They're going to have $4,000 a month in just general retirement living expenses, $6,092 in healthcare for each of them. That's the national average based on the software coming from the Bureau of Labor of Statistics survey, if I can get that right, from 2022, I believe is where that's coming from. And then you've got the go-go years. So age 60 actually to 75 here is what the go-go years are. They're going to spend $15,000 extra. When you're in retirement years, you may not spend the same amount forever, but in the early years when you're healthy, there's a good possibility that you're going to be going out and you're going to be living a little bit more. You want a vacation, take the kids places. But as you age, what we have seen with our clients especially is in the mid 70s, late 70s, 80s, you're going to start to really slow down a bit. You're not going to be traveling as much oftentimes, and you're probably not going to be spending as much just because you just kind of want to hang out. Maybe watch a little bit of news and complain about what's going on in the world. Who knows? May have somebody I know like that. And so let's look here at the investments. Looking at the investments, they've got $400,000 all pre-tax in a 401k. That's going to be a big differentiator there. Is it after tax? Is it pre-tax? What does that look like? And then they have their property all paid for. I didn't put in property tax and insurance because I'm looping that in with their general expenses. So this is kind of the full breakdown. So as far as the investment allocation goes, that's going to be a big deciding factor on how this plan looks. If they're super conservative, if they're going over here with preservation, 20%, in stocks, 80% bonds, may not look as good as if they go 70-30, which we currently have. And so if we go with the 70-30 allocation, you can see a projected annual return and deviation. That means where it's falling from the mark, from the high point down. So that's your deviation there. 96% probability of success with projected $1 million at the end of life. Now, if we adjust this for future dollars, $1 million today is going to be much different than $1 million you're actually passing down for inheritance. It would be $477,000 with inflation in there. And so if we're looking at this breakdown, the plan looks really great. Now, we also want to start thinking about taxes because you have all pre-tax dollars. what does this look like for you? Well, if we go over here, we can say, okay, guess what? Your federal income tax rate appears to be, as long as they don't change the the brackets drastically, then you're going to be at 15%. You do have to think through, though, what happens if one of you passes away early, because that will then put you filing as a single tax filer. So that's all stuff that you want to be thinking through when we're looking at the planning side of things. As far as distributions go, we can look here and we say, hey, you know what? If you convert, it actually may not make sense to do the conversions right this second based on this scenario. Now, everybody is different in what they're looking at and what their plan looks like. But one thing I want to bring up is IRMA Medicare tax. So we want to say, okay, what does this look like? They're going to have RMDs eventually at 75 because they have this pre-tax dollars. What would this look like on their plan? Well, if we're looking here, the estimated Medicare premium threshold, they're never crossing that threshold to have that extra tax that you're paying in Medicare. Now, if one of them did have an unexpected death, that may give this a different scenario. But just looking at this, these are things you want to think through when you do have the 401k and the pension. If there's something else that maybe you think through that you would like for me to look at, just let me know. And as somebody said, in a comment here on a recent video, that's all, folks.